Yo, yo, yo. Hey, I'm Mark Buckner with the Mark Buckner Group and the Ben Lawless team at Compass, and I'm here with Alan Cosby from Westward 360.
That's correct. Yes, Westward 360.
All right. Tell us about the name of West. How'd they come up with Westward 360?
There was a company called TriView that you're familiar with.
Yeah.
I think 3 years ago at midnight on New Year's Eve, we merged with Westward and became Westward 360 to have a new, I believe the idea was all-encompassing view because we do community association management, rental management, sales, and leasing. They also have a pros professional division, contracting arm. So I think the idea was we can do everything you need.
What's community?
Community association, so HOAs.
I thought.
I think you're familiar with that.
Yeah, I'm pretty familiar with HOAs.
So HOA management. So now they do HOA management, I think, in 12 cities across the country. We have offices in Denver, Las Vegas. They're doing work in Portland. So I have nothing to do with that involvement, but yeah, they're managing now nationally.
Oh, wow.
And not just in Chicago.
I did not know this. Well, we're right into it.
Right into it.
Right into it. So I appreciate you coming out and meeting with me. So I've owned Levitt probably 7 years. I've known you somewhere around 7, 8 years now.
Yeah.
Wow, it's been a while. So I invited Alan to talk about real estate investment. You're a good guy to have that conversation with, and that's how we kind of got introduced through a mutual party.
Yeah. I bought a building because you owned a building in Old Irving Park. Which is true.
That is true.
On the same street.
Yeah. And so we're going to just bounce around. Let's just keep going. So you found, last time we were talking, you kind of feel like you found your niche in investments.
Yeah, I think that, I think years ago I got into real estate when I tell people to because it made me happy with the schedule. I liked working with clients. I liked buying and selling. I still like doing that. I like continuing to do that. I think if you were to ask me what part of it I've enjoyed the most historically, it is either myself or with clients buying some level of renovation and then long-term hold of rental buildings and assets. And so every year I try to do a little bit more of that while still not turning away single-family home, townhouse, condo buyers who I enjoy working with as well.
And so what got you to fall in love with, in summary, it sounds like helping clients invest in real estate and yourself in investments?
Myself, my first job was I worked $10 an hour for Patty Furman up in Coldwell Banker. She just does REOs, and I graduated college in 2009. I applied to 50 jobs on Craigslist, and she was the only person who emailed or called me back. They were real estate. They were at pet stores. I just wanted to start working.
Let's reverse. 2009, we are the heart of the stock market crash, and the real estate market is on the verge of crashing.
Correct. And Patty, it has started to crash, yeah. And Patty had just sold REO properties for Freddie and Fannie, I believe, since like the late 80s, early 90s.
Oh, so she was seasoned.
When that happened, it's not like today where a lot of agents have that experience now who got into it. They were dumping, you'd go in the office in the morning and you'd have 5 to 25 emails from asset companies of, hey, here's like your assignment today. And those were listings. I mean, this is yours, go do it. And so she just kept hiring assistants like myself, who, I'm not speaking for her business, but we would do different roles for different periods of months. My first role was get in the Honda Civic that she gave me.
Oh, she gave you a car?
Well, you'd get it at the office. She had some company cars at the office. You'd go there.
Oh, wow.
You'd get your assignment. You would drive. I would drive sometimes to Antioch, to Round Lake, all the way down to Homewood, Flossmoor, and I would be posting notices on doors for people and seeing if homes were vacant or occupied. And you'd get yelled at. You'd get threatened to be shot at. A lot of times, heartbreakingly, you'd have tenants who had no idea that their landlord had been foreclosed on. Those were the worst because those were the people who were paying rent and didn't understand why they would have to move because they've paid their rent every month on time to a landlord who had stopped paying the bank 3 years ago.
Yeah.
And then I did that. I did some work then in the office doing the contracts. I did a couple
And you were
months
making $10 an hour with a car.
Well, that was it. It was $10 an hour, and I was living at home, and it was 5 minutes from my house, and I'd pick up coffee for her and her management team on the way in. I mean, it was a true like assistant job. But the cool thing about it was I got to do like every part of investment real estate I got to do. Like, not just investment, but every part of like a real estate transaction. So like, so if we had a listing in Highland Park at a house, we'd get 24 offers on contracts. And I would spend the whole day just inputting every offer into the REO data, like asset manager, for them to review and pick the offer that they wanted to go with. It was an insane, like, diving into real estate at a very bad time.
Yeah, it's funny because I got into it in 2010, and I got into it buying stressed properties.
Yeah. And so from that, to answer your original question, I saw so many properties that I would always see what they sold for and what we were selling them for. And finally, in 2010, after doing that about a year, I saw a 2-flat in Evanston that was listed for $125,000. I saw that it sold for $410,000 a couple years earlier. It had a tax bill of like, I want to say like $14,000 on it because of that value in Evanston. And I borrowed some money from my mom and dad, and I bought that property, started renovating it with my dad, kind of just patching it together. I would go to Home Depot and I would wait to try to find someone either in the section who worked at Home Depot who said they could do the work, or someone in the parking lot because I had no idea what I was doing. And I would try to get them to follow me back to the house and give me a quote. I was taken advantage of. It was a horrible way to do it, but it was a great way to also learn what not to do.
But if you found someone in Home Depot during that time, they may have taken advantage of you, but they were also giving you some cheap rates because guys were out of work. Contractors were out of work.
They were. I met a woman in the plumbing section to show you how dumb or not great.
So you didn't have much.
I think I've told a story to one person besides my parents. I met a woman in the plumbing section who told me that her boyfriend was a plumber and that she was his assistant and that they were like $75 an hour and they could come fix the problems I had. And I said, great. And asked why her husband, who he worked for, and she said herself. When they got to the property, her boyfriend, the plumber, and this is not to make a joke, he was blind. And she was there to help him like find the areas that needed the work because she didn't know how to do it, but he did. He had some medical thing where he had gone blind. I felt so terrible about it, but it took so long because he was blind and I was paying hourly that my like amazing value plumber became easily the most costly part of this renovation because I couldn't get myself as a 23-year-old to let this person go and find a different solution.
You've set me up here. If I laugh, I'm an asshole. I don't know how to not laugh. What?
I told one other person that story, and I decided to do it on a recorded story for my second time, so I'm not feeling like a genius either.
At what point do you fire him?
I actually was able to fire them because they didn't do a good job. I had plumbing breaks that they had fixed already, and so it was fired for cause. Truthfully, the worst part of it was I had to then go to a Home Depot further away because I was afraid to go back to that Home Depot near my building in Evanston. So I was then driving to a Home Depot double the mileage away because I was too afraid to go back to the plumbing section of that Home Depot.
Oh, yeah. You were so close. I mean, you were on track of how to network and get resources, but you needed to take it a step further.
And to be honest, the one thing I tell people is the greatest gift of buying something in 2010 was you really couldn't screw it up. It's I put a lot of money into this building more than I did. I made a lot of wrong decisions. I had a lot of tenants move in who weren't good tenants, so I had to get out. I had someone on the second floor who was breeding pit bulls in one room and convinced me that it was his radio that was on that was the barking for like a month. And I just kept like spending money and paying people to leave and then getting good tenants and then having issues. And then after 3 or 4 years, I decided to sell that property. Due to a different incident that happened there, which we can talk about if you like. But I sold it for like $230,000 and I put maybe $25,000-$30,000 into it. So it was you could have just held it and just sat on it until things turned, and then was able to sell it to someone who bought it.
So it was a success.
It was a success, right? And not the kind of thing you get today. Like today, now you buy a property, you have to be a little tighter on how you operate it and put it together to have that success.
You paid $25,000 in repairs, which was also $25,000 in education.
It was also
And
the last property I've sold of myself, like of things that I've owned,
that you've bought.
that I've bought. That I bought myself. I sold a property, an 8-unit building in Michigan, because my partner had decided they wanted to exit, so we sold that. But otherwise, everything I've bought since then, I still own today. Condos, single family.
So how did you go
Multi.
from doing the REOs to where you're
The one thing
fill in
about
some more
the one thing
blanks
about
to
that
me,
first
how
job,
this career started?
yeah, the one thing about that first job that was incredible was that she told you day one, if you got your realtor's license, like you couldn't continue to work there. Because I think there was a fear that you could steal the connections with those asset managers and take some of that work. I don't know for sure, but it was always, and I love this. It was always a clear, like, we'll give you $1 or $2 raise every year or two, but like you're capped. Like this is not going to be a place where you end up making 80 grand, 50 grand, 80 grand, 150 grand. And so I just knew that in order to not continue to do that and live at my parents' house, I needed to, if I wanted to do it, be a broker. And so I got a leasing license. I lived at home for another 3 or 4 months, but I just started leasing anything I could, working for what ended up being a very corrupt leasing company that went under business. But we would just lease out $800 studios, get paid a half month commission, and
All right.
making $2,500 when you're 20 back then was enough to like live downtown in an apartment, pay $450 for a room, and have a great time. So
And so we did leasing a little bit, and then when did it start to open up for you?
I got very fortunate that my mom's friend had a house in Wilmette, and she had just fired her realtor. And I asked if she wanted me to sell it. I think I charged her 3/4 of a percentage point in order to win that business, plus the 2.5% co-op. And I remember the buyer's agent laughing at the closing table of what I was paid. It was about $1 million house in Wilmette.
Did you have a broker's license?
I got my broker's license. I was a leasing agent, but then I got my broker's license within a year. I sold that house. I then decided to quit this leasing company I was at and move to Miami for 9 months. To talk about the company, they wouldn't give me my commission check from the sale unless I promised that I would be working there another year. That's how kind of crazy this company was, and then it folded. So I cashed that check. I moved to Miami, and my parents called me.
We're talking South Beach?
South Beach. My cousin lived there. I got to live in a studio. I lived in Coral Gables, but I worked in South Beach at bars and restaurants for like 8, 9 months. I never got to do that in college. I always thought it'd be great.
Yeah.
It was until it's just, you can only do that for so long. But my parents called me and they were like, "Hey, a magazine came that you're in." And I was like, I don't know what you're talking about. And they was like, "It's the Chicago Association of Realtors magazine." And I was like, "Well, send me a picture of it." And I won Rookie of the Year as a sales agent for doing that one sale and getting paid like $7,000. Because nobody else who got their license that year had done any sales on the north side of Chicago somehow. So I decided in my mind, I was like, you know what? I have to go back.
This is like 2010?
This is like 2010, 2011. Yeah.
Yeah,
So like
it's
things were
the hardest year.
No, it was the hardest year. And anyone who just started and got their license was either working on a team where you weren't credited. And so somehow this idiot won Rookie of the Year. I still had it on my email signature until about a year ago. I took it off because I sounded like I was trying to be in the movie like Rookie of the Year. But it was kind of like this little boost. I was ready to leave Miami. It was May. It was getting hot. And I drove back. And on my way back, I called one of the owners of TriView who I had met doing a BPO for, a broker price opinion. And I said, "Hey, I'd like to come work for you guys on Monday if that's cool." And I just went to the office and started. Yeah.
You are funny.
So yeah.
So you just kind of dumb luck fell into Nathan's hand.
Yeah. I reached out. Yeah, I called them, and I had met him doing. I had been doing BPOs, or broker price opinions. If you like, from that, I had gotten somebody who was signed up to do those in like the same volume that Patty was doing REOs, but didn't want to do them. He asked me if I wanted them. They were paid between $75 and $150 per, and I would drive around all day doing the photos, and I had 2 buddies at home who would do some of the work, and we had like a little BPO company for like 6 months while I was doing the leasing.
You're kind of scrappy, man.
Was it. It was fun. I mean, it was, the nice thing about being is I found it's fun being scrappy when like you're 23, 24, right? And like $100 is like a ton of money. You just have to find different ways to do it, like as you get older.
So when did you start to make sense of leasing and starting to do investments? So you made this investment, The two flat. When did you buy that two flat in Evanston?
2010.
2010. So you came
Yep.
back from Miami.
Yep.
2010. That was going haywire on you.
Yes.
But how did you start to pick up, like, you know, investing in real estate investments is, for me, in a way to make money.
When I would show apartments for individual landlords and they'd show them themselves, I always originally kind of hated the idea of like landlords. I thought they were douchebags who like treated tenants terribly, and I just like didn't like that idea. Like not from like a political approach or anything, but just like the idea of it. And then I showed, I wish I knew the guy's name. I showed an apartment on Southport, at like Southport and Armitage, maybe a little bit north of, a little bit north. No, like that's not, those don't intersect. Like Southport and Wrightwood. And the guy pulled up and he was driving like an old Toyota Corolla, whatever, just like a tiny old car. And I was like, oh, you like the property manager? And he's like, no, I actually own this. I posted myself. And I was like, oh, like, is this the only building? And he was like, no, I have some other buildings. I was like, oh, like, how many buildings do you have? And he's like, I don't really know how many buildings I have. I was like, well, how many units do you have? He's like, I think I have like 1,500. And I was like, you have 1,500 of these? Like, and I was like, and I asked him, I was like, what do you do? And he's like, I have a management company, but I like going to them. I like tinkering. I like knowing my tenants. I like making sure everyone's happy. I went up, I showed the apartment. The tenants were like, oh, he's great. Like my clients rented it. They loved renting from him. And I think for whatever reason, I remember that being like a moment when I was like, I can do this in a way that I feel good about how I treat my tenants. I make money, and it gives me kind of like a goal where I just kind of keep trying to save up to buy something, make myself broke again versus spending it on something stupid, and kind of like just repeat that process. And I've liked that a lot.
There's different types of real estate investing.
Yeah.
It doesn't sound like you got into this with some grand scheme plan of, I think I'm going to target residential versus commercial versus industrial.
Right.
You just kind of fell into residential. And I think that's how a lot of people get into it. They get introduced to a part of the industry versus some overall schematic plan.
Yeah, I mean, people ask me a lot, like, why I do, like, this type versus something else. The honest answer is I'm not that smart, and so I like being able to just understand, like, one thing and just try to focus on and do it. I have friends who do commercial leasing. I have friends who, like, own mixed use and commercial. When I see a vacancy in a storefront for, like, 6 months, I get anxiety like driving by it.
Me too.
When I find out that like I have 2 months of vacancy of a parking spot, like an exterior space in Rogers Park, I like lose my mind. I'm like at Home Depot buying like parking for rent signs and like putting them up. So just the mentality of like having vacancy is not for me. And that's what I think is the biggest draw to residential versus other things. Is like you can't put a restaurant into a space in 24 hours. And you can do that with apartments. And that's it.
How do you feel when all of a sudden you see a building and all of a sudden a Starbucks pops up in it?
That I don't own?
Yeah.
Fine. That doesn't bother me.
It just, I just get a little envious.
That they have a Starbucks tenant?
Starbucks, Chase, Jimmy John's, like long-term tenants that you can likely count on for a commercial space. That's like a triple net. It's an awesome tenant.
No, they do. Yeah, they do. I think I wouldn't enjoy it though, like owning that. Like even if you told me I had a 12, like I've looked at them. I looked at the building a couple years ago in Logan Square in California. It had the Starbucks in it. It had beautiful apartments above. And I looked at it and it wasn't appealing. Like even knowing that was there and never moving. I don't know
Which
why.
one did you look at?
The one at California and
Logan Square Boulevard. I knew that's where you were going.
Yeah.
That was a nice build. That's a nice build.
Like it was like great. Yeah. It was great.
Yeah.
But
so what are the misperceptions of investing in real estate?
So the last year I'll say his name, Charlie, I told him I was going on tonight. I've had this really cool relationship where I met someone who was a tenant at one of my clients' buildings, reached out to me because he was thinking about investing in real estate. He was almost like the last meeting I took doing this because have done so many in a row where it was like, hey, I'm trying to like quit my job in 2 years and like live off rental income. And like they've watched a lot of TikTok and they're just like jazzed up. And I met with him.
Is that possible?
No, it's not. But like,
it's like I'm really doing something
But
wrong.
you see it online all the time. You see people who are like I'm living in like Croatia, and like these buildings are making me X amount, and I'm killing it,
I'm watching around
and
TikTok.
yeah, I don't watch either. But I was like, I just kind of spelled that out for him. He's like, now what I want to do, I kind of like, I know what you did because you talked to me about it like 2 years ago when you leased us the place. And I just want to have like that slow growth. So I was like, great. So we bought him something, and then we bought a 3 flat last year, and he just bought a 3 unit building. He bought the deal of a lifetime a couple weeks ago, right near your building in Bucktown at Levitt. And I just like that he had like the same mindset of this is something that like you look back on 15, 20 years later and you're really proud and you're in a really great financial position of like what you did. You don't get that gratification after year 1, year 3, year 5, in terms of like that being like your income, unless like you're out raising a ton of other people's money and then you have a much smaller percentage of ownership and you're doing that, which a lot of people do and love, and that's great, but that's not what I've done.
So, misperception, you could sit on your ass and just collect rent.
So that's yeah. So that's one. Two, like what you put on a spreadsheet to underwrite a building very rarely happens. And anyone can make a building look amazing on a spreadsheet. We have a number of clients who we manage for who during COVID bought buildings in Chicago or surrounding suburbs and live in California, New York, and they underwrote it themselves to this, or a broker told them they'd be getting this amount of rent or these, costs for utilities, whatever. And it just doesn't perform that way. There are neighborhoods where your vacancy rate is 15, 20%, not 5%. They are overshot their rents by 20% on a pro forma. And so for me, like that misconception that like you're going to hit like that return each year, or that it's going to, go straight up is not accurate, I found. My favorite buildings, now I own buildings that are 8, 12, 14 units. My buildings that perform the absolute best are my 2, 3 flats, not because they're different buildings, but because I bought them 8, 9, 10 years ago. And time fixes everything in real estate. Like they're locked on great rates. The tenants have been fantastic. I know the buildings inside and out. Those are the ones that perform. In 2, 3, 4 years, I think these bigger buildings I have will be performing very similarly to those. It just takes time.
What did you learn from the smaller buildings that gave you the confidence to buy the larger buildings?
I lived in one of them, which helped. Living in there, I lived in the second floor, so I had tenants on the first floor, tenants on the third. So I got to really like know the building, and they knew I was there. I consistently could only lease out the top floor to like 3 dudes out of college because every time I showed it to 3 girls, they'd be like, "This is great," and I'd be like, "By the way, I live downstairs." And very quickly they'd be like, "Yeah, this isn't for us."
Creepy guy.
Creepy, and I didn't know how to present it without being creepy. So I just constantly had a rolling bunch of 23-year-old Big Ten grads living upstairs. But I think those buildings just were smaller and easier to manage. They had, they were great all brick buildings. They were in amazing neighborhoods, right? One's in Wicker Park, one's in Old Irving Park. And they just kind of work. I don't know.
And so that gave you the confidence to try something bigger.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. I mean, I'm part of a group with 2 other guys. We own 12 or 15 larger buildings between 10 and 35 units. I own a percent of that as a manager. And so with those, I had the experience with those guys of us putting syndication deals together and buying bigger deals. So I saw bigger buildings. We managed bigger buildings. We're in that space. I tried to not compete with us on those, but there were buildings that kind of fell in between what we were looking for, which is usually 3, 4, 5, $6 million, and like that 1.5 to 2.5 range, and that's kind of like where I found this sweet spot, where you don't have a big enough deal where you want to put syndication docs together and do extra legal work and extra tax prep, but they're also good buildings in good areas. And with that, I targeted kind of a mentor of mine who was buying, so I was helping buy stuff as well as a buyer. He just was always like, let's just buy B- neighborhoods. He's like, let's just buy the stuff where like if everything goes to shit again, we can rent it out to someone who's a manager at Culver's, right? And like they're going to be able to live there and pay the rent, and it's going to be fine. And so that's where I started buying the larger buildings, just so I had like a little more exposure, neighborhood wise.
So, which is, I think, a misperception of that location, location, location. Like you have to be in the best locations to succeed. And what you're saying is that's not necessarily true. So, what is considered like a B minus location for you?
For me, this like the stuff I'm talking about, and I'm not trying to give out grades. So if you're listening and you live there, I'm not. I would live there too. Some stuff in Westridge, Rogers Park, Edgewater, Glen, but a little bit further west. Since I bought that building 3 years ago, I wouldn't consider it that anymore. It's now has almost like an extension of Andersonville feeling.
Yeah,
It's a building
I
where
was just there last night.
yeah, I mean, I underwrote one bedrooms there, renovated at 1275 to get my renovation loan on it. We're renting them at 1550 now, and renewing at that price. So I mean, we probably get higher than that. And some things like that happen where like they put in the train up there at Peterson, and like neighborhoods change. Um, but like that area, like mostly North Side. I picked up one a couple months ago, kind of West Avondale, Belmont Cragen border over near Keeler and Belmont. So like areas that surprise you in terms of like how like the tenant base is. And that doesn't mean like young white hipsters are like taking over the building. Like I'm talking about buildings where like you guys have long blue collar kind of Chicago people who live there, and the buildings are being sold, and you're kind of figuring out who can stay and pay a little bit more to kind of make it work because it has to go up in the rent a little bit, and who's just naturally moving out because they've been there or their lease is up, and kind of like figuring that balance out.
Why does rents have to go up a little bit?
Well, I mean, because a lot of times, like for example, the building we just bought, is a good example of like a tough place to be in real estate, where somebody inherited the building from someone who owned it for 30, 40 years, and they ran it for 5 to 10 years. I'm not sure how long she ran it. She did an amazing job. So often we see larger multi-unit portfolios go to the son or daughter who inherited it. They never wanted to be a landlord or land person, and it just goes to hell. Like, the buildings fall apart. There's no maintenance. They can't collect rent. They don't have a management company. They're trying to impress their mom or dad who have passed away, right? It's almost like a badge of honor, and the buildings sell for way less than they should, and they become value adds when they need to. This was a building where she owned this building from her grandfather for 5 to 10 years, did amazing CapEx projects, like kept the building in great shape. But the one beds range from $625 to $800, and they're 800 square feet, and they're updated, right? They're nice apartments that like the neighborhood has pushed. And so the problem is that when you as that person don't want to increase the rents because your relative who owned it or you've owned it and you don't want to like hurt anyone's feelings or run it as a business, the only way you can get out of that is to sell it. And typically you're selling it to somebody who's paying near what a pro forma rent is on the building. So when I say needs to raise, it's because you went from no debt to 75% loan to value on a $1 million building, and taxes and other things are increasing, and like you're generally increasing like the quality of the building.
To make the deal work, the rents have to go up.
Exactly.
The seller wants
Right.
the premium price. You're paying for it. You underwrote it, so factoring in your taxes are going up. You have a mortgage on it. That
Correct.
seller didn't, or that seller's mortgage that was due on it is very different than what you owe on it. And oftentimes, I think renters don't understand that. Why
All the
would
time.
they haven't owned the building, so they don't have that life experience to understand
Correct.
it, and why rents go up. It's not that the landlord, not that the new owner's trying to be an asshole.
No, I mean,
You're just trying to make a living just like everybody
and
else.
to use an example, the 3 flat, right? The first 3 unit building I bought in Chicago in Wicker Park, I had a tenant move out 3 months ago. He was there 9.5 years. His rent went from $3,000 to $3,100, and that's because he bought a Tesla and didn't tell me, and he was charging it in the garage. So I was trying to like make up the $100 of electric he was adding to my bill. I met him there to see it because I renovated it, and he was like, "I can't believe you didn't like raise my rent." I tenant the second floor. They moved in 4 years ago. I told them, "Hey, just so you know, I really don't raise rent unless it's like a problem, like you're a problem." And they've been there 4 years. They're surprised. They literally aren't buying a house to like start a family. They told me because they're so comfortable getting an amazing 2-bed plus office for $2,200 in the heart of
Interesting.
Wicker
Why
Park.
don't you raise the rents?
In that building, I had that mindset which now I have moved on from.
Yeah.
Like, it was that mindset because I'm living there and knowing them more and, like, having that relationship where it was hard. I was the same person as the person I was just somewhat criticizing who I bought this building from.
Yeah, my philosophy, I don't know what your philosophy is now, is my philosophy, turnovers are our most expensive thing.
Yeah.
Right? And that's when I started managing my own buildings and kind of parted ways with a property manager because I felt like I was concerned about the tenants I was getting, and it's a whole different subject.
Yeah.
It's kind of on the subject. But anyways, what I tell applicants is like, first 2 years, I don't raise your rent. And I honor my word.
Yeah.
Unless you give me a reason to raise your rent.
Right.
First 2 years, I want you to get comfortable. I want you to love it there.
100%.
And if you're good, I want to keep you there. And it makes sense for me to keep you there for 2 years. That third year, I'm raising your rent. Why? Because everything's going up on me. The taxes, the water bill, the waste management.
Insurance.
Insurance is another topic that I love to talk about. Insurance is just insane right now. And if I don't, the value of my property goes down.
Correct.
Right? Because it's all the
Correct.
value of these investment properties. How do we determine the value? Tell them.
What do you mean? Cap rate?
How do we determine the value of a multi-unit?
Net income. I mean,
Yeah, it's based off
net
the income. So
Right.
if my income's low, my
Right.
property value is worth.
And you know what, to answer your question,
lower.
that's another reason why with the 3-unit it was easier because I was locked at 3% for 30 years.
You
With-
were on a 30-year
Right.
mortgage.
With my ones that every 5 years I have to put new debt on, I am looking at like what's my building worth way more because I need it to be at a certain number so I can get my financing and feel comfortable I'm not going to have like a challenging financing. And that's what it is more than anything.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's summarize kind of our the misconceptions. Quick profits and location determines success. I disagree. I agree with you, like targeting other neighborhoods. I think that's an awesome idea, especially when you're going for larger buildings.
Yeah.
In neighborhoods that have potential, which you've experienced, and I'm a huge fan. You've brought out Belmont Craig, and I think Belmont's just gonna explode.
I'll say one other thing about location real quick.
Yeah.
If I can. Before I bought that building in Evanston, I was writing an offer that night to buy a 3-flight in Waukegan. That was like half the price. And my mom and dad both owned real estate before they moved to the suburbs and sold it all. So like that was another part. Like my dad, who has passed away like 3 years ago, like we used to talk about real estate all the time and what his experience and whatnot. So I found this what I thought was a great deal in Waukegan. So at like 2:30 in the morning on like a Wednesday night while I'm still living at home working as an assistant, my dad walked in my room, turned the lights on, woke me up, and said, "There's a fire." And I was like, "Where?" And he's like, "At your building in Waukegan." And I was like, "What are you talking about?" He's like, "Go drive up there. You got to go right now." And I was like, "I don't want to drive to Waukegan at 2:30 in the morning."
I don't even own the building.
In a part of Waukegan, I had no idea what was a good part or bad part or whatever in Waukegan, but I didn't think it was a part of Waukegan I wanted to go to at 2:30 in the morning. And I was like, "I don't want to do that." And my dad was like, "Well, what if the fire was in Evanston?" I was like, "Well, I'd go to that party. I know where that is in Evanston. Like, I feel bad about that building." And so from that, what I took away is I want to buy real estate where I'm comfortable going at any time of the day or night for any reason that I have to go, regardless of what the issue is or where it's located. And for me personally, that has also made me much more interested in within an hour or 2 hours of Chicago as I look at some opportunities outside of Chicago, and not interested in Boise, Idaho, and Tallahassee, and some of these things that like are more national is like you kind of scale a bit. It makes me very focused location wise on like where I can get to and like what I can see and touch and go into.
Did you know I bought a place in Idaho?
No, did you? But that was yeah. But that was for you. I'm not gonna walk that back. But aren't you like using that personally as well as investment? Forget it. I'm never going to Idaho my entire life, so I don't care. I think it's a challenging investment.
Next month. We're gonna go.
I had a client who bought like 3 buildings with me, and then we were gonna buy another one, and he said, "Sorry, I'm pulling your money. I'm buying 8 houses in Boise like 6 years ago." He did.
Oh,
and he
that's
did
great.
so well, and then he held them, and now they're all back to like what they were worth. He kind of bought before, and then there's a big going on.
I just couldn't resist that one.
So yeah.
No, my my property in Idaho. The negotiation with my wife was that it had to be investment first, secondary home second. So
Got it.
Meaning it needed to perform. It needs to be able
wait,
to.
Your wife wanted the investment, or you wanted the investment?
My wife wanted an investment.
Oh, good. That's awesome.
She was like, I want
Yeah.
something in the mountains, and like, which surprised the shit out of me. I was just
Yeah.
like, oh, because we're getting rid of an investment, and she's like, this is after the pandemic. She was just like,
Yeah.
I want a place for us to go for new memories with the kids, future generations. And she's like, I want something in the mountains. And I was like, yeah, and we'll do it.
Yeah.
Like, I was committed. And she's like a month later, she's like, I don't think you understand.
Yeah.
I want this to happen. I said, listen, I'll deliver. I'm just not finding anything for us
Yeah.
right now that I like. But that was the deal. Like, we ran a portfolio on the property. Like, how is it going to work? Will it support itself? How much am I was going to go into my own pocket? I was okay carrying it like 20% if I had to.
Yeah.
But my goal was really to have it perform.
Airbnb or short-term rental. Yeah.
Yep. All the above,
How
which
do you
we're
get
doing.
to Idaho?
So we are in
If you can't answer that question, I feel like immediately.
Jackson Hole.
Jackson Hole. You fly to Jackson
American United Airlines,
Direct
one
from
direct
United.
flight.
Hole. Okay,
Yep.
that's a good answer. That's
Yep. 2.5 hours. You're there.
fair. Okay. Yeah.
Turo, cars in the parking lot, takes me
I
40
do like
minutes to my
Turo.
door.
Yeah, I love Turo.
I love Turo.
Me too.
Like, it's freaking amazing.
I love Turo, but I've always kind of thought if Turo like ended, I'd love to see the people who own like 12 BMWs and would just be so screwed that they're just selling cars like
I don't see it ending, man.
I don't see it.
I don't see it ending.
I love it.
So kind of these are some great misperceptions that I think a lot of people. I think the other thing, and I think you've kind of answered that, and I'll dovetail to that, is you don't have to be an expert in the industry to get into the industry.
No.
Right?
No.
You have to be passionate about it. You have to be willing to learn. You have to be able to fall on your face a few times.
Yes.
You have to have some sleepless nights, anxiety. Like, unfortunately, sometimes those are when my better ideas or my better problem solvings happen. Like 3 o'clock in the morning, I wake up worrying about something and freaking idea comes, my solution to my problem comes at that
And if
time.
that's where you're at, I joke with this client, Charlie of mine, the best thing you can do is find a real estate agent who owns multifamily real estate themselves and has just bought something in the last 6 months and has no money to buy something else. Because we still look every day. Don't you look every day?
Yeah.
It's like I have looked at my bank account and had 40 units in Chicago, and I'm going and touring buildings, and I have like 24 grand cash, and this building's like $1.8 million. And then if I love it, I'm calling 3 or 4 clients to be like, I love this. And they're like, well, why don't you buy it? And I'll be like, I have no money. And sometimes I'll be like, if you buy it, I'll roll my commission in and I'll take 5% of it if you want. Like, that's how much I love the building.
Yeah.
But this client of mine bought a building piece in a vacant lot that I've been trying to buy for like 4 years, and the seller finally is ready to sell it. And I had just bought this other building. And I called him and I was like, I'm going to give you the greatest jumpstart to your real estate investing life you've ever had. And he closed on it, and he's like very happy. He's a client for life probably because of that.
So let's talk a little bit about how do you, and you're talking about it right now, and that is how do you find the properties? How do you find the deals? Not that there's, and are there deals out there to be found?
There are deals out there to be found.
Were there deals out there to be found 18 months ago?
What did I buy 18 months ago? Yes, I bought an amazing deal 18 months ago. I bought a short sale in Lakeview, a 2-flat with a coach house from on Wolfram from a family who bought the house from Farmer Wolfram in 1890, and that was a great deal.
How'd you find the short sale?
I left a very long voicemail for an agent who just did short sales at the time, explaining to him that when the buyer on the deal he had busted out, here's why you should call me, and talked about my first job doing foreclosure stuff and understanding short sales for about a minute. And like 2 months later, he called me and was like, hey, I saved that crazy long voicemail you sent me. Do you want to see this? These idiots busted out the deal. And I went and bought that deal. And then I bought 2 more all last year with him. 2 of them were flips. They were just purchase, close, and resell. And then one of them I still own and I'll do something with in the
Flips
future.
meaning wholesaler at the closing table?
Closed on them. Closed on them because short sales is very hard to do that. It's doable, but it's harder. And I closed on both of those and put very minimal work into them and just like resold them 4 weeks later.
You did?
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. One was a home run. One was a double, but it was like a double you'd take all day.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So how do you determine add value in construction cost?
We do a lot of it. Like I said, the company I'm at, we have like a construction type arm to it. I don't necessarily use them for all that, but like I kind of get like exposure and contractors. I have one contractor who I've worked with for 10 years who like we've done most of our projects together. We now own two buildings together, which is kind of cool to kind of see that.
So
That
he tool belt on the waist, hammer in his hand. He's your guy.
yeah. He's a working GC, which I love. So he's there with his guys, doing work. So I will usually walk a building with him. At the initial walk, it's ridiculous to walk a building and try to bring a GC back, in my opinion, in this market.
Yeah.
So I try to bring him, with the first time or take photos. And then we just kind of use like some rough estimates per unit, some rough CapEx stuff, and we try to use the inspection to bring as many people through as we can to tighten it
So
up.
for people who are new to this stuff, what
Yeah.
the hell does that even mean?
What does what mean?
CapEx.
So CapEx is the not sexy stuff. It's like it's the inside of the person. It's the plumbing, the electric, the roof, the windows, the masonry. Concrete is really expensive. Driveways, sidewalks, underground plumbing. That's like your capital expenditure stuff. That's the stuff that people skip the most, right? That people go in and they say like, oh, I could make this really beautiful, but they do that and they don't replace the galvanized plumbing that's 80 years old, and then they have kitchens and baths with water pressure that's 80 years old, and so like you don't get that return. Those are the people, in my opinion, who are usually trying to fill up a building with rents and then sell it off, right? Or refi all their money out and they don't really care about the building as much. If you go into it that you're going to own this building 50 years, you want to replace all that plumbing. You want to replace any electric you can. You spend more up front so that you have less headaches down the road. You also have better management costs because they're not sending people out, right, 3 times a week to rod toilets and pull hair out of lines and, hydroblast plumbing and who knows. So that's CapEx.
So how do you determine it? How do you determine what it's going to run you? Or you've just done it so many times, so you know.
We do it enough where like now I kind of know. Enough now where I can like estimate it close enough to like where if I'm off, it's not going to hurt me. Enough to where like if like you're doing a project and you're over on one, you're usually under on another cost. Masonry and windows are the best because your guys can just go by whenever they want and take some pictures and give you a number. Plumbing is usually a little bit more like once you get in the building and really like see like who's complaining about what and kind of understand it. But usually when I'm doing a building, I'm looking at, unless it's like 1970s late or or newer, we're doing it.
Yeah. No. And that's kind of what's inspired the part of this interview is because I'm pulling out I'm remodeling one of my buildings right now. I'm pulling out 2 stacks. I'm building out an ADU unit in the basement. We're putting in all new underground plumbing, put in new water line, having to expand some windows, new lintels, concrete floor. We dug out, had to put in 2 new I-beams,
Yeah.
just
The difference in that project versus like the project where someone doesn't do it is like you do it and then you're like, oh, the city comes out and they sign off or they make you fix things. The other person is like, oh, the city made me do this. Like I usually like judge a building when I hear someone be like, oh, the city made me do this. The city made me do this. I'm like, the city's not great, right? Like I get that in terms of
if
like
the city catches
with
up
landlords,
to you,
but if
you're
yeah,
really in fucking
but yeah,
trouble.
yeah. Whenever they're like, yeah, the city made the guy do all this, I'm like, this has been a mismanaged building for like a long time.
Yeah, absolutely. So you're just kind of networking, trying to find places.
Yeah, so I mean, in terms of like the deal flow, a lot of multifamily brokers, some like the more multifamily brokerage here in the city, there are deals on the MLS. I also am someone who like doesn't feel bad looking at something on the MLS and offering what I think it's worth. My offers on multifamily when I buy it or I'm working with a client who doesn't mind me sharing are very transparent offers. I usually will say like, hey, we want to pay this because we're going to put this in. I will send my Excel sheet of like my budget. I'll show them what I think the rents will be afterwards, and I'll show them, what I think our return will be, and I'll be like, tell me where I'm wrong. And a lot of times the answer is like, you're not wrong. We're just looking for someone to pay more than that. Or they're like, I don't understand this because this isn't really like my field of listing real estate, but here I am with this listing, and I don't blame realtors for that at all.
No.
But I don't feel bad offering what I think something's worth. And when someone gives me like an emotional reaction of like, well, I hate this. Like why would you send me this? Or I disagree. I'm just like, that's fine. Like it's an asking price and it's an offer price. And if it doesn't meet, I'm like the first person to be like, good luck. A lot of times when it closes at a number, I'll reach out and be like, what are they doing with it? Like, it's like how are they making that work?
Yeah.
And if they are, like, that's great.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about a few things, and one of the questions is how do you put deals together? And probably one of my number one rules is transparency.
Yeah.
Like, this is what I think. This is what I'm doing. This is how I think it should go. And that's how you and I put a deal together. I was looking for a multi-unit. I couldn't find them, so
Right.
I just started calling people. I brought it to the owner, one of the owners of Westward, and I was just like, "Hey, I'm looking for something. This is what I'm looking." They had that one coming up. He's like, "Why don't you work with Alan from this deal? I need someone to broker the deal." That was our negotiation. But you did a pro forma, and you were like, "I think these rents could increase by X amount," and I was like, "Okay." Renting them then.
Yeah, right. And they did.
And you
did.
did. You brought them up.
Yeah.
That was at the time you guys were managing the building. That was part of my deal, that you guys can continue to manage it. And then I was just like, all right, if you're brokering the deal and you think you can get these rents, then you're doing the rents.
And that's also like the difference, right? I mean, that's like working with someone in real estate who's like planning to spend their whole life in this. Is like, we try to sell, whether it's a house or a condo or whatever, to someone who, like, when they call you because it's time to sell it, you're very excited to like get the call.
Yeah.
You don't want to be like, oh shit, like I did not want them to buy that like 5 years ago.
And
sometimes clients buy it anyway, and they still call you, and you're like, all right, now we gotta go.
That's part of that's my approach to this industry. If you are looking to buy something and I think it's a piece of shit, I'm going to tell you it's a piece of shit.
Right.
We're going to have that moment. And if you still want to do this, and I've laid out, I think you're going to have to invest X amount of dollars to get it to where you want, regardless of this list price, and you're okay with that because these types of problems are going to come up, I'm fine with 100%. You buying it. I need to be able to sleep at night.
7 or 8 years ago, I had a client fire me because I was so passionate they not buy something that they kind of just sent me an email. They're like, we're just on different pages. I don't think we should work together. And it was something like we kind of had like an agreed upon contract, did an inspection. Like they should not have bought this. And they didn't buy it. They bought something else. But that was when one of the owners of our company was like, hey, you have to learn the skill of like giving your opinion, presenting the information, and then remembering that like brokers provide information, clients make decisions, and get out of the way.
Yeah.
So now I send the email. That's like my email that I star and I save. Happens maybe once a year, twice a year, where I'm like, hey, these are my concerns. What do you want to do? And if they move forward, I literally save that email in a folder.
Absolutely.
And I hope that they never call me pissed off. But if they do, I can just like reply to that email again and say, like, here it is.
Yeah, and I think you're the same way. We'll always pick up the phone, but it's just like I got to be able to sleep at night, and everyone's spending their hard-earned money, so it's like, most of my I don't think I've had a client come back and be like, they were upset with me.
I haven't either. Yeah, I
They
haven't
knew what they got into.
Right, yeah, I haven't
They
either.
appreciate knowing what they're getting into.
Correct. It's just a fear I have. It's like, so I just try to like not let that happen.
Actually, Levitt, the building that we sold, I knew that building got water.
Oh, I thought you were about to sue me right now. No. I was like, oh my God, this is it. I knew I was coming on this for a reason.
I knew this building got water. I knew they were getting water in the basement. We knew the gangway, right?
Yep.
We knew the gangway flooded. You guys were riding out the neighbor's gangway, so it would flood less. Within the 7th day of owning that building, that basement flooded.
Yeah. At least it wasn't. No one's living there. It was just.
No, someone was living there. It was. Listen.
Oh yeah, they had access.
I knew what I was getting into. I was okay. I bought that building. It had termites.
Right.
I treated it. I solved it. I replaced some I-beams. Like, there was add value to this building. There's still a lot more add value. That's next on my project. Yeah. That's my third project coming up.
I always joke, like, what if like disclosures from like the real property disclosure was actually like fully transparent and honest? The inspections and like transactions, once everyone was doing that, would be hilariously like more smooth. Yeah. If you were like, hey, like the light switch in like the second bedroom sticks, like it doesn't go on. Like, just one time, I want to just put like a laundry list together and see if somebody would still just be like, oh, this is cool. Like, as is, like, list price, like, we can handle that. But you don't. Everyone's just like, no to everything. And then it's like, maybe there was a meth lab in the basement. Like,
wow.
No, not applicable. Not in your basement.
Not in my basement.
Breaking
Bad here.
Oh Oh, I see it actually now.
Huh?
I kind of see it now. I kind
Oh,
of see it.
oh,
The
what's my
glasses and
name?
everything.
What's my
Is it
name?
Hindenburg? Is that it? Heisenberg?
Heisenberg's.
Heisenberg, yeah.
Heisenberg's. You know my name.
I was a better Call Saul guy.
Wow, full circle. Last podcast I did, we went down to Breaking Bad too.
Really?
Yeah, it's funny. I don't know. Sorry. Well, I think this is great time to end. I really appreciate this,
Yeah,
man.
this has been
Thanks for
great.
coming in. When you get on Instagram, we'll send you a link so you can post this on
I
there,
can't. This is
brother.
all I'm going to post. Just every week, I'll just retag this. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Appreciate it.